Before we begin, I want you to quiet every voice around you, and more importantly, every voice within you. Because some of you came here today smiling on the outside, but carrying silent storms on the inside. You know what it feels like to love deeply and yet feel empty. You know what it means to invest your heart and still end up with fragments in your hands. And somewhere along the journey, a whisper settled into your spirit, a dangerous whisper. It's over for your relationship, over for your marriage, over for the love you once believed was unshakable. But I came with a divine interruption to that lie. Because heaven is not silent about your situation. God has not stepped back. He has not changed his mind. And he has not cancelled what he spoke over your life. There is a word being released right now, stronger than your pain, louder than your doubts, and more powerful than your past. And if you can lock into this moment, if you can hold on just a little longer, if you can open your spirit beyond what you see, something is about to shift. Not gradually, not eventually, but now, because the God you serve is not limited by what broke. He is defined by what he restores. So don't disconnect. Don't lose focus. Don't let distractions steal this moment. Because before this message ends, you will realize that what you thought was the end was only the place where God decided to begin again. When you begin to understand God, you must first understand his nature, and his nature is consistency. He does not start anything with the intention of abandoning it. That is not in his character. Men may begin and quit. People may promise and fail. Emotions may rise and fall. But God is not governed by instability. He is not influenced by circumstances, nor intimidated by opposition. When he begins something, he commits his integrity to its completion. So when we say God is the author of love, we are not speaking poetry, we are declaring a divine principle. Love did not originate from human feeling, it originated from the mind of God. That means love is not sustained by your strength, it is sustained by his nature. The problem is many people have reduced love to emotion. They think love is something you feel today and lose tomorrow. But real love, the kind that comes from God, is not fragile. It is not temporary. It is not subject to moods or moments. It is a force. The scripture declares in 1 John 4:8, God is love. Not that he understands love, not that he practices love. It says he is love. That means everything God does flows from that essence. So if God is the source of love, then anything he authors in love carries his signature, his permanence, his faithfulness, his power. Now think about this. If God authored something in your life, if he initiated a relationship, placed love in your heart, or ordained a connection, do you really believe he would walk away from it unfinished? That would contradict his nature. Philippians 1:6 declares with authority, he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. That is not a suggestion, that is a divine guarantee. God takes responsibility for what he starts. He does not leave his work halfway. He does not abandon his purpose in the middle of the process. But here is where many people struggle. They measure God's commitment by human behavior. Because someone walked away, they assume God has walked away. Because something broke, they assume God has ended it. But you must separate God from human weakness. People can fail you without canceling God's plan. Situations can collapse without destroying God's intention. Because God's purpose is not dependent on human perfection, it is sustained by divine sovereignty. You must understand this deeply. When God authors love, he builds it with the capacity to endure pressure, to survive storms, and to outlast seasons of brokenness. What you are facing right now may look like an ending, but in the mind of God, it is only a phase in the process. God is not confused about your situation. He is not reacting, he is executing a plan. Isaiah 55:11 declares, so shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish what I please. That means when God speaks love into your life, that word carries an assignment. It cannot fail. It cannot die. It must accomplish what God intended. So even if love appears weak, even if it seems distant, even if it looks like it has collapsed, if God is the author, then the story is not finished. And this is where faith becomes critical. Because faith is the ability to trust the author even when you don't understand the chapter you are in. Right now, some of you are reading a painful chapter. A chapter filled with silence, distance, confusion, maybe even betrayal. And you are tempted to close the book and declare, this is how it ends. But you are not the author, you are the participant. And the author is still writing. God does not write tragedies without redemption. He does not design stories that end in defeat. Every delay, every challenge, every moment of pressure is being used to develop something deeper, something stronger, something more aligned with his original intent. Because what God starts, he does not just finish, he perfects. Hebrews 12:8-2 calls him the author and finisher of our faith. Notice that he is both the beginning and the ending. That means he is responsible for the initiation and the completion. He does not hand it off halfway. He does not lose interest midway. He remains committed from start to finish. So when doubt enters your mind and tells you, it's over, you must confront it with truth. If God started this, then God will finish it. Not based on what you see, not based on how you feel, but based on who he is. God's reputation is tied to his ability to complete what he begins. If he were to abandon what he started, he would deny himself, and that is impossible. 2 Timothy 20:13 says, "If we are faithless, he remains faithful." He cannot deny himself. Do you understand the power of that? Even when you struggle to believe, God does not struggle to remain committed. Even when your faith weakens, his faithfulness does not. So the issue is not whether God will finish, it is whether you will trust him while he is working. Because sometimes God allows the process to stretch you. He allows situations to reach a point where your strength is no longer enough. So you are forced to rely on him completely. Not because he wants to break you, but because he wants to build you. And in that process, love is not being destroyed, it is being refined stronger, deeper, more resilient. So do not misinterpret the pressure as proof of failure. It is evidence that God is still working. Because if he had finished, there would be no process. If he had abandoned it, there'd be no conviction in your spirit. The very fact that you still care, still hope, still feel something stirring inside you, that is a sign that the author has not closed the book. So stand firm, hold your position. Refuse to let temporary circumstances make a permanent decision for you. Because the God who started this story is still writing, and when he finishes, it will not reflect your pain, it will reveal his glory. You must change your perspective about brokenness, because what you call the end, God often calls the entry point for his greatest work. Human nature fears broken things. We discard what is cracked. We walk away from what is damaged, and we label it finished. But God does not operate with human conclusions. He does not define destiny by damage. He does not cancel purpose because of pain. In fact, many times he allows brokenness not to destroy love, but to expose what is weak so he can rebuild it on a stronger foundation. Psalm 3:4-18 declares, "The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit." Notice that God doesn't distance himself from brokenness. He draws closer to it. That means your broken place is not a place of abandonment, it is a place of divine visitation. When love breaks, it reveals what was built on emotion, pride, misunderstanding, or insecurity. And God will never restore something to its former state if its former state was flawed. He is not interested in patchwork, he is committed to transformation. So when something breaks, heaven does not panic. God begins to work, because brokenness creates space for truth, and truth creates the foundation for restoration. Isaiah 4:30-19 says, "Behold, I will do a new thing, now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it?" God is not trying to revive something exactly as it was. He is introducing something new out of what was broken. And here is where many people miss their miracle. They keep trying to go back to what was, while God is trying to lead them into what can be. Broken love is painful, yes, but pain is often the tool God uses to get your attention. It strips away illusions. It forces reflection. It exposes areas you ignored when everything felt comfortable. And in that exposure, God begins the process of healing. Because before restoration can occur, there must be revelation. You cannot fix what you refuse to acknowledge. So God allows the breaking to reveal truth, not to shame you, but to position you for change. Jeremiah 18:4 gives us a powerful image. "And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he made it again into another vessel, as it seemed good to the potter to make." Notice carefully, the clay was damaged, but it never left the potter's hand. That means even in your brokenness, you are still in God's control. You are not discarded. You are not forgotten. You are being reshaped. And when God reshapes something, he does not recreate weakness. He reinforces strength. So what broke in your life is not proof that love failed. It is proof that God is not finished. The enemy wants you to interpret brokenness as finality. He whispers, "This is it. Nothing more can come from this." But God speaks differently. He says, "This is where I begin again." Because God specializes in taking what looks ruined and turning it into something remarkable. He does not waste pain. He redeems it. He does not ignore failure. He transforms it. Romans 8:28 declares with power, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." All things, not just the good moments, not just the successful seasons, but even the broken, painful, confusing experiences. God uses all of it. That means your heartbreak is not outside of his plan, it is being woven into it. So instead of asking, "Why did this break?" you must begin to ask, "What is God building through this?" Because restoration does not mean going back, it means moving forward with greater wisdom, deeper strength, and a purer foundation. And sometimes, what God restores will not look like what you lost, because he refuses to limit your future to your past. So do not fear brokenness. Do not run from it. Do not let it define you. Let it refine you. Because in the hands of God, broken love is never the conclusion. It is the raw material for a greater expression of his purpose. What you thought ended has only shifted into a new beginning. And if you remain in his hands, the outcome will not reflect the damage, it will reveal his glory. There is something you must settle in your spirit once, and for all, God is not limited by the condition of what he restores. He does not require something to be functional in order to fix it. He does not need evidence of life to bring resurrection. In fact, God does his best work when situations look impossible. Because when something is clearly beyond human repair, there is no confusion about who gets the glory. Ezekiel 37 presents a powerful picture when the prophet is taken into a valley full of dry bones. Bones that were not just dead, but completely lifeless, disconnected, and beyond natural recovery. And God asks a question that challenges logic. Son of man, can these bones live? From a human perspective, the answer is obvious, no. But God was not asking for logic, he was inviting faith. And as the prophet speaks the word of God, something extraordinary happens. Bones come together, flesh forms, breath enters, and life is restored. This is not just a story, it is a revelation of how God operates. He does not consult the condition, he releases his word. And when his word is released, life responds. Romans 40:17 declares, God gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did. That means God does not wait for evidence before he acts, he creates evidence by his power. So when something in your life appears dead, whether it is love, trust, connection, or hope, you must not agree with what you see. You must align with what God says. Because what looks finished to you is only waiting for his command. John 11 gives another undeniable demonstration when Jesus stands before the tomb of Lazarus, a man who had been dead for 4 days. By every human standard, it was over. The body was decaying. The situation was irreversible. But Jesus did not analyze the delay, he addressed the condition. And with authority he spoke, Lazarus, come forth, and death had to release its grip. That is the power of God's voice. It overrides time. It overrides decay. It overrides impossibility. So why do you think your situation is too far gone? Why do you believe that what you lost cannot return? You are measuring with human limitations, but God operates beyond them. Jeremiah 32:27 declares, Behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me? That is not a question seeking information. It is a statement challenging your doubt. There is nothing beyond his reach. Nothing too broken. Nothing too lost. Nothing too dead. The only limitation is your willingness to believe. Because restoration begins where doubt ends. If you keep agreeing with the condition, you will resist the solution. But if you align with God's word, you position yourself for a miracle. And understand this clearly, God's restoration is not partial. When he restores, he does not bring things back in a weakened state. He restores with increase. Which Joel 20:25 says, I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten. Years, not moments. That means God is not bound by time loss. He can compress what was lost and release it back into your life in ways that exceed your expectations. So even if you feel like you have wasted time, wasted energy, wasted love, God is saying, I can recover all of it. But restoration requires your participation. You must release what is dead into his hands. You must stop trying to fix it in your own strength. Because as long as you hold on to it with human effort, you limit divine intervention. Surrender is the gateway to restoration. Faith is the language that activates it. Obedience is the posture that sustains it. And when you align with God in these areas, you will witness something undeniable. What you thought was buried will begin to breathe again. What you thought was lost will begin to return. What you thought was beyond repair will be rebuilt by the power of God. So do not finalize what God has not finished. Do not bury what God has not declared dead. Because the same God who raised the dead, who restored nations, who redeemed broken lives is still at work. And if you trust him, you will see that nothing in your life is beyond his ability to restore. You must come to a place where you redefine what love truly is. Because if your definition is wrong, your expectations will always be unstable. Most people have been trained through culture, experiences, and emotions to believe that love is a feeling. Something you fall into, something you rise out of, something that fluctuates depending on how you are treated. But that understanding is shallow, and anything built on it will eventually collapse under pressure. True love is not sustained by emotion, it is established by covenant. Emotion is powerful, but it is also inconsistent. It can be high today and absent tomorrow. It can be influenced by mood, circumstances, misunderstandings, and even temporary frustrations. If love is built only on emotion, then it becomes fragile, unpredictable. That is why many relationships begin with passion but struggle to endure pressure. Because emotion can start something, but it does not have the strength to sustain it. Covenant, however, is different. Covenant is not based on how you feel, it is based on what you have committed. It is a decision, a binding agreement, a conscious choice to remain, to endure, and to honor what has been established, regardless of changing conditions. Covenant does not ask, do I feel like loving today? Covenant declares, I have decided and my decision stands. When you study how God operates, you will discover that he is a covenant-keeping God. Everything he does is rooted in covenant, not convenience. His relationship with humanity is not based on emotional reaction, it is based on divine commitment. That is why even when humanity fails, God remains faithful, not because we deserve it, but because he has bound himself by his word. Deuteronomy 79 declares with authority, therefore know that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and mercy for 1,000 generations. Notice that he keeps covenant. That means he does not withdraw because of failure. He does not abandon because of weakness. He remains because he has committed. This is the model of true love. So when you say you love someone, the question is not how strongly you feel, it is how deeply you are committed. Because feelings will be tested. Situations will challenge your emotions. There will be moments when love does not feel convenient, when it is not easy, when it requires sacrifice. And in those moments, emotion will not be enough to carry you. Only covenant will sustain you. That is why many people misinterpret the struggles in love. When difficulty arises, they assume something is wrong. When emotions fade, they conclude love has ended. But in reality, those moments are revealing whether your love is emotional or covenantal. Because covenant love does not run when it is tested, it stands. It does not collapse under pressure, it strengthens. It does not withdraw in difficulty, it commits even deeper. This is why Malachi 14 speaks strongly about covenant in relationships. Yet she is your companion and your wife by covenant, not by feeling, not by temporary attraction, by covenant. That means the relationship is anchored in something greater than emotion. It is rooted in a binding agreement before God. And here is what you must understand: God honors covenant. When something is established in covenant, heaven takes responsibility for sustaining it. That means you are not carrying it alone. God himself becomes involved in preserving, strengthening, and guiding that relationship. But if something is built only on emotion, it does not carry the same spiritual weight, because God does not back what he did not establish. So the question becomes, is your love emotional or is it covenantal? Because if it is only emotional, it will fluctuate with circumstances. But if it is covenantal, it will endure through seasons. Jesus himself demonstrated covenant love in its purest form. In John 31, it says, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. To the end, not until it became difficult, not until they failed him, not until they misunderstood him, but to the end. That is covenant language. Even when betrayed, he remained committed. Even when denied, he did not withdraw. Even when abandoned, he stayed faithful. That is not emotion, that is covenant. And that is the level of love God is calling you to understand. Because covenant love is not weak. It is not passive. It is not dependent on perfection. It is strong, intentional, and unshakable. It has roots. It has endurance. And when love is rooted in covenant, restoration becomes possible. Why? Because covenant does not break when emotions fluctuate. It remains intact even when feelings are strained. That means there is always a foundation to rebuild on. But when love is only emotional, once the feeling is gone, there is nothing left to sustain it. This is why you must mature in your understanding of love. You cannot approach something divine with a shallow mindset. Love is not just something you experience, it is something you choose, something you commit to, something you build intentionally. And here is the powerful truth: when you align your love with covenant, you align it with God's nature. Because God does not love you based on how you perform, he loves you based on his covenant. Jeremiah 3:1-3 declares, yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore with loving kindness I have drawn you. Everlasting, that means it does not expire. It does not weaken. It does not fade. That is covenant love. So if you want to experience love that lasts, love that survives pressure, love that can be restored even after breaking, you must move beyond emotion and step into covenant. Because emotion may ignite love, but only covenant can sustain it. And when love is sustained by covenant, it becomes unbreakable. Not because challenges will not come, but because commitment will not leave. So stop measuring love by how you feel and start measuring it by what you have committed. Because true love is not proven in moments of ease, it is revealed in moments of challenge. And if it is rooted in covenant, then no matter what it goes through, it will not be destroyed. It will endure. You cannot talk about restoration without confronting the responsibility that comes with it. Because many people desire restoration, but they resist the process that makes it possible. They want God to fix what is broken while they continue to think the same way, act the same way, and hold on to the same patterns that caused the damage in the first place. But God is not interested in superficial repair. He is committed to complete transformation, and transformation demands 3 non-negotiable elements: faith, surrender, and obedience. Without these, restoration will remain a desire, not as where it begins, because faith is the bridge between what you see and what God has spoken. Hebrews 11:1 declares, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That means restoration does not start when you see change. It starts when you believe before anything changes. If you wait for visible proof before trusting God, you will never move forward, because God operates in the unseen before he reveals it in the seen. Faith requires you to stand on his word even when your circumstances contradict it. It demands that you reject the evidence of your senses and embrace the authority of his promise. But faith alone is not enough, because you can believe for restoration while still holding on to control. And that is where surrender becomes essential. Surrender is the act of releasing your grip on how things should happen, when they should happen, and what the outcome must look like. It is one of the hardest requirements because human nature wants control. You want to manage the process, dictate the timing, and ensure that everything aligns with your expectations. But God does not share authority over his process. Isaiah 55:8 reminds you, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord." That means if you insist on your way, you will resist his work. Surrender is not weakness, it is alignment. It is saying, "God, I trust your wisdom more than my understanding. I release my expectations and accept your design." And when surrender is genuine, it creates space for God to move without resistance. But even faith and surrender must be followed by obedience, because obedience is what activates what you believe. Many people claim to have faith, but their actions contradict their confession. They say they trust God, but they refuse to follow his instructions. And that creates a contradiction that blocks restoration. James 20:17 says, "Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." That means faith without obedience is inactive. It has no power to produce results. God will often give you specific instructions in the process of restoration. Sometimes he will tell you to forgive when you feel justified in holding on to offense. Sometimes he will tell you to communicate when you would rather withdraw. Sometimes he will tell you to change habits, attitudes, or behaviors that you have become comfortable with. And in those moments, your obedience determines your progress. Because God's promises are not disconnected from your participation. He provides the power, but you must follow the process. And understand this clearly, obedience is not always convenient. It will challenge your pride, it will confront your emotions. It will require you to act against what you feel. But that is where transformation happens. Because as long as you are led by your feelings, you will remain stuck in cycles. Obedience breaks cycles. It introduces a higher standard, a divine order that overrides human patterns. And when faith, surrender, and obedience come together, they create an environment where restoration becomes inevitable. Not because of your strength, but because you have aligned yourself with God's system. So stop asking God to restore while resisting his requirements. Stop praying for change while avoiding responsibility. If you truly want restoration, you must believe when it seems impossible, release control when it feels uncomfortable, and obey even when it is difficult. Because God is ready to restore, but he will not bypass the process that prepares you to sustain what he restores. One of the greatest struggles you will face in your journey is not whether God can restore, but whether you can trust his timing. Because human nature is impatient. You want things to happen according to your schedule, your expectations, your sense of urgency. And when it does not happen that way, you begin to question, to doubt, and sometimes to conclude that it is too late. But you must understand this: God does not operate within your timeline. He operates within his purpose. And his timing is not random, delayed, or careless. It is precise, intentional, and perfect. Ecclesiastes 3:11 declares, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." Not in your time, in his time. That means if something has not happened yet, it is not because God is late. It is because the timing is not complete. Because God does not just restore based on desire, he restores based on readiness. There are things he must align, things he must develop, things he must remove before restoration can occur in a way that is lasting and effective. And if he were to act before that process is complete, you would receive something you are not prepared to sustain. So what feels like delay is often preparation. What feels like silence is often alignment. And what feels like too late is actually right on time, in the plan of God. But here is the tension: you are living in time, while God operates beyond it. That is why 2 Peter 38 reminds you, with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. God is not pressured by time the way you are. He is not rushing to meet deadlines. He is orchestrating outcomes. And when the moment is right, everything will come together with a precision that only he can produce. Now understand this clearly. When God says right now, it does not always mean immediate in your perception. It means immediate in alignment with his purpose. Because God's no is not based on your impatience, it is based on his readiness. And when that moment arrives, restoration does not trickle, it manifests suddenly, powerfully, completely. One moment you see nothing, and the next moment everything shifts. That is how God works. He prepares in silence and reveals in power. Isaiah 6:22 says, "When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen." Not you, not circumstances, the Lord himself. That means your responsibility is not to force the timing. It is to trust it. Because when you try to rush what God is doing, you risk stepping outside of his will. You make decisions out of frustration, you act out of fear, and you create outcomes that lack divine covering. But when you trust his timing, you remain in alignment, and alignment positions you for fulfillment. So stop measuring your situation by the clock. Stop comparing your journey to others. Stop concluding that it is too late. Because as long as God is involved, it is never too late. He is the God who redeems time, who restores lost seasons, who brings fulfillment where there was delay. And when he moves, he does not just compensate, he exceeds. So if you are in a place where you feel like time has been wasted, opportunities have been lost, and restoration has been delayed, hear this clearly: God has not missed your moment. He has been preparing it. And when it unfolds, you will realize that every delay had a purpose, every waiting season had a reason, and every moment was leading to a now that could not have happened any other way. Because God's timing is not just good, it is perfect. And when He restores, it will not be late. It will be exactly when it was meant to happen. As we come to the close of this moment, I want you to understand that this is not just the end of a speech. It is the beginning of a decision. Because everything you have heard carries no power in your life until you choose to believe it, receive it, and act on it. You have been reminded that God is the author of love, and what He starts, He finishes. That means your story is not incomplete, it is still in progress. You have seen clearly that broken love is not the end, but the doorway to restoration. You have been challenged to understand that God restores what seems dead, lost, or beyond repair. And you have been called to rise above emotion into covenant, to embrace faith, surrender, and obedience, and to trust that God's timing is not late, it is perfect. Now the question is not whether these truths are powerful. The question is whether you will align your life with them. Because truth does not change your life automatically. Truth transforms you when you respond to it. Some of you are standing at a crossroads right now. You can walk away from this moment and go back to doubt, fear, and discouragement, or you can step forward in faith and declare, I will trust God no matter what it looks like. You can hold on to pain, replay the past, and allow brokenness to define you, or you can release it into the hands of God and allow Him to restore what you could never fix on your own. You can continue trying to control everything, forcing outcomes and exhausting yourself, or you can surrender, obey, and let God move in ways that exceed your understanding. The choice is yours. But hear this clearly, your future will not be determined by what happened to you. It will be determined by how you respond to what God is saying to you right now. Because God is not finished. Let that settle in your spirit. God is not finished with your love. God is not finished with your story. God is not finished with your life. What you thought was over is still under construction. What you thought was buried is still within reach of His power. What you thought was lost is already being positioned for restoration. And if you can hold on, if you can trust Him beyond your feelings, beyond your doubts, beyond what you see, you will witness something undeniable. You will see God restore. You will see Him rebuild. You will see Him bring life where there was none. And when He does, it will not just bless you, it will reveal Him. Because restoration is not just about getting something back. It is about experiencing the faithfulness of God in a way that transforms your entire perspective. So stand firm. Stay aligned. Remain faithful. Because what is coming will not look like what you lost. It will be greater, stronger, and filled with purpose. And now, before we close, I want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Because time is one of the most valuable things you possess, and you chose to invest it here. Thank you for your attention, because in a world full of distractions, you made the decision to focus on something that can change your life. Thank you for your openness, because transformation only happens where there is a willingness to receive. And most importantly, thank you for allowing this message to reach your heart. My prayer for you is not just that you heard these words, but that they take root within you. That when you leave this moment, you do not leave unchanged. That something within you shifts your mindset, your faith, your perspective. Because you are not meant to live in defeat. You are not designed to remain broken. You are not created to settle for less than what God has promised. You are called to walk in restoration. So go forward with confidence. Go forward with faith. Go forward with the assurance that God is with you, working in you and moving on your behalf, even when you cannot see it. And remember this always. Your love isn't over. Your story isn't finished, and your restoration is not coming someday. It has already begun. Thank you, and may God bless you abundantly.